Hello and welcome. This is Worldview on Spectrum TV, bringing you stories around the world. My name is Emedion James. Let's begin from the Middle East, where U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will join Gaza peace plan talks between Israeli and Hamas negotiators in Egypt today. In Washington, D.C., Donald Trump's threat to invoke an anti-insurrection law and deploy troops to more U.S. cities. We move now to Europe, where Russian President Vladimir Putin had said that Russian forces had captured almost 5,000 square meters of land in Ukraine in 2025. These and many more stories coming up shortly on Worldview Today. Let's begin today from the Middle East, where U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S. President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will join Gaza peace plan talks between Israeli and Hamas negotiators in Egypt today. Their arrival comes as the second day of indirect talks on Tuesday ended without tangible result, as senior Palestinian officials familiar with the negotiations told newsmen. Trump struck a positive tone as Israelis marked the second anniversary of the 7 October Hamas-led attacks on their country, saying there is a possibility that they could have peace in the Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not comment on the status of the talks, but told Israelis they were in a fateful days of decision. In a post on X, Netanyahu added that Israel would continue to act to achieve its war aims, the return of all the kidnapped, the elimination of the Hamas regime, and the promise that Gaza will no longer be opposed to Israel as a threat. Still in Gaza, Swedish activist Greta Thunberg alleged that she and other detainees of the Gaza Flotilla were subjected to torture in the Israeli prison they were held. Thunberg told a news conference in Stockholm that she and others were kidnapped and tortured by the Israeli military. She also declined to elaborate, adding that she didn't get clean water and that other detainees were deprived of critical medication. In the meantime, Hamas said on Tuesday it was ready to reach a deal to end the war in Gaza based on President Donald Trump's plans, but still has demands as Qatar's Prime Minister and senior U.S. mediators headed to Egypt to join indirect negotiations between the Palestinian militant group and Israel. On the second-day anniversary of Hamas' attack on Israel that triggered Israel's assault on Gaza, Trump expressed optimism about progress towards a Gaza deal. A source close to the talks said they had adjourned for the day and the atmosphere was better than Monday. Negotiations today would be a decisive indicator of whether progress was possible, given the presence of senior mediators, the sources added. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani of Qatar joined today's talks, an official said, with the aim of pushing forward the Gaza ceasefire plan and hostage release agreement. Still on Gaza, pro-Palestinian protesters demonstrated around the world on Tuesday against Israel's assault on Gaza, while vigils and other events commemorated Israelis' victims on the second anniversary of the Hamas attack that sparked Israel's war in the enclaves. An indirect negotiation took place in Egypt on a U.S. proposal to end the war. Protests in support of Palestinians took place in Sydney, Istanbul, London and Washington, as well as in New York City, Paris, Geneva, Athens and Stockholm. Demonstrators spoke out against the humanitarian crisis and bloodshed in Gaza, while politicians urged pro-Palestinian protesters not to let their outrage turn into glorification of Hamas violence. Hamas October 7, 2023 attack killed 1,200 people and the militant also took over 250 hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Let's move now to Washington, D.C., where hundreds of Texas National Guard soldiers gathered on Tuesday at an army facility outside Chicago as Donald Trump threatened to invoke an anti-insurrection law and deploy troops to more U.S. cities intensified the battle over the limit to his authority. The Republican president on Tuesday again left open the possibility that he might use the centuries-old Insurrection Act to sidestep any court ruling blocking the dispatch of Guard troops into Democratic-led cities over the objections of local and state officials. A federal judge has temporarily barred Guard troops from heading to Portland, Oregon, though a separate judge had allowed for now a deployment to proceed in Chicago, where federal agents have embarked on a sweeping crackdown on illegal immigration. Let's take a quick pause right now and talk more about the National Guard troops being deployed. The one question on everybody's mind is, why is Donald Trump trying to deploy the National Guard to U.S. cities? President Donald Trump's deployment of the National Guard to several U.S. cities have drawn a round of legal challenges by state and local officials. Trump argues that his use of the troops is necessary to curb violence in Democratic-controlled cities, crack down on crime, and support his deportation initiatives. He has found himself on a coalition course with several Democratic state governors who have resisted these efforts and who say the deployments are unnecessary and risk escalating tensions. Legal cases have recently been filed in Illinois and Oregon. As the legal battle continues, here are the basic things that we need to know. What is the National Guard troops and who oversees it? Let me give you clarity. The National Guard consists of primarily state-based troops that typically respond to major issues like natural disasters or large protests. All 50 U.S. states, the District of Columbia and the territories of Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands have their own contingent of National Guard troops. Those troops also can be deployed abroad, and some units specialize in fighting wildfires or securing the U.S. border. Guard members ultimately report to the Department of Defense and can be federalized or brought under the control of the President under certain circumstances. However, requests for its support normally start at a state level. In those circumstances, the governor of a state activates Guard troops during an emergency and can request additional help from the President or other states. National Guard troops have limited power. They do not enforce the law or make arrests, seizures, or searches. A law called the Posse Comitatus Act limits the power of the federal government to use military force for domestic matters. But what legal basis does Trump use to deploy the National Guard troops? A little-known provision of the U.S. military law governs the President's authority to deploy the National Guard on his own. Until now, presidents have rarely used it. American law allows the President to call National Guard troops from any state into service if the U.S. is invaded or is in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, or there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the U.S. government. Trump invoked this law to bring 2,000 National Guard troops under his control in June in order to support raids led by Immigration and Custom Enforcement (ICE). Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also cited the law in a memo deploying 200 members of the Oregon National Guard into the federal service on 28 September. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on 6 October that they were confident that they can win on the merit of the law. Why does Trump want to use the National Guard troops in Portland? Trump again is seeking to use the National Guard to respond to demonstrations after protests near an ICE building in Portland in early October. Federal officers, including the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and Customs and Border Patrol agencies, CBP, clashed with demonstrators who opposed Trump's mass deportations initiative. Trump has claimed the city is burning down, but Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, a Democrat, said there is no insurrection in Portland, no threat to national security. The Trump administration has moved to send 200 California National Guard troops to neighboring Oregon to respond to the protests. But U.S. District Judge Karen Emigot, who Trump appointed during his first term, has temporarily blocked this. On Saturday, Judge Emigot blocked Trump from federalizing the Oregon National Guard. In the meantime, hundreds of National Guard soldiers from Texas have arrived at an Army facility outside Chicago as part of Donald Trump's threat to deploy troops targeting Democratic-led cities. On Sunday, the U.S. President ordered the deployment of 300 National Guard soldiers to America's third-largest cities, prompting a strong response from local protesters and politicians. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has accused Trump of using troops as political props and pawns. However, Greg Abbott, Republican governor of Texas, said in a post on X that the elite Texas National Guard are on ground and ready to go. He also added that they were putting America first by ensuring that the federal government can safely enforce the federal law. That is everything you need to know about the National Guard troops being deployed in some U.S. cities. We move now to Vietnam, where record floods submerged streets and inducted homes in Vietnam today, leaving tens of thousands of people stranded, with at least 8 killed this week. Flood waters reached the top of cars and rooftops in areas of Thai Nguyen City, about 80 kilometers north of the capital, Hanoi, with many left stuck at home and others forced to flee. The Environment Ministry said 8 people were killed in flash floods and landslides in Vietnam's mountainous north since Monday, and 5 others were missing. The military said it has mobilized 30,000 personnel and thousands of boats to join rescue and relief efforts. It used 3 helicopters to drop more than 4 tons of water, instant noodles, dry cake, milk, and life jackets to people in flooded parts of Lang Son province. From late Tuesday to today, the country recorded the highest flood levels on 3 rivers in the north in nearly 40 years, state media reported. We'll take a quick break right now. When we return, we'll turn the spotlight to the Russian and Ukraine war scene. Do stay tuned to us for these and many more stories right after this breather. Many thanks for staying tuned. This is Worldview on Spectrum TV. We turn the spotlight now to the Ukraine and Russia war scene, where 3 people were killed and 1 injured in a Ukrainian missile attack on Russia's Belgorod region. The local governor said today and people might still be trapped under rubble. Vyacheslav Glakov, the governor, said in a statement on Telegram that the attack was carried out on a settlement called Maslova Brixden, which is near the border with Ukraine. He posted a photograph of a sports center there, which he said had been partially destroyed. The photos showed the building had sustained serious damage to its walls and roof. In the meantime, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Russian forces had captured almost 5,000 square meters, that is 1,930 square miles of land in Ukraine in 2025, and that Moscow retained complete strategic initiative on the battlefield. Russia's 2025 gains would amount to nearly 1% of Ukraine's land area, and the country controls nearly 20% in total. Putin, addressing a meeting with Russian top military commanders on his 73rd birthday, said Ukrainian forces are retreating in all sectors of the front. He said Kiev was trying to strike deep into Russian territory, but it would not help it to change the situation in more than the 3.5-year-old war. Russia's defense ministry on Tuesday reported the capture of 2 more villages along the front, which Ukraine's top commander says now extend over 1,250 kilometers, that is 775 miles. However, Ukraine's military in August dismissed Russia's recent offensive as a failure, with Moscow forces failing to capture a single major Ukrainian city this year. In France, President Emmanuel Macron faced growing pressure on Tuesday to resign or hold a snap parliamentary election to end political chaos that has forced the resignation of 5 prime ministers in less than 2 years. The 47-year-old centrist president has repeatedly said he will see out of his second term, which ends in 2027. But resignation calls, long confined to the fringes, have entered the mainstream during the worst political crisis since the 1958 creation of the Fifth Republic, France's current system of government. On Tuesday, as Macron's outgoing Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu held last-ditch talks to form a new government, his first premier in 2017, Edouard Philippe, said it was time for a new president to break the deadlock. Away from that, authorities said that the newly elected mayor of a town in western Germany was in a critical condition after being found with multiple stab wounds. Reports say that Iris Stalzer, age 57, dragged herself back into a house after being stabbed around midday. It was also said that she had stab wounds to her neck and abdomen. Prosecutors and police said in a joint statement their inquiries was looking into every possibility, and also added that close family involvement cannot be ruled out at the present time. Meanwhile, her son and daughter, aged 15 and 17, had been taken into questioning. Stelzer was airlifted to hospital and was still in intense care, the authorities' statement said. In Myanmar, at least 24 people were killed and 47 wounded while protesting against Myanmar's military government after an army motorized paraglider dropped 2 bombs on the crowd. The military attack on Monday evening as around 100 people gathered in Changkyu Township in central Myanmar for a national holiday. Thousands have died and millions have been displaced since 2021 when the army seized power, triggering a civil war with armed resistance groups and ethnic militias. After losing control of more than half the country, the army is making significant gains again through an especially bloody campaign of airstrikes and heavy bombardment. The township that was attacked on Monday is in a Savagin region, which has been a key battleground in the war. Large parts of it are under the control of volunteer militia established after the coup to fight the militia government or the junta. Let's move now to Africa, where Burkina Faso's military government says it has arrested 8 members of a Dutch-based humanitarian organization, accusing them of spying and treason. There were 3 Europeans, a Malian, and 4 Burkinabe, among them the NGO's country director and deputy. The organization said they were detained some time ago, but it was not previously reported. Security Minister Mahamadou Sana said the NGO had collected and passed on sensitive security information that could be detrimental to national security and the interests of Burkina Faso to foreign powers. The International NGO Safety Organization, which provides safety information to aid workers, has categorically denied their allegation. Lastly, on Worldview today, the Chadian government has terminated its agreement with a controversial conservation organization that has the Duke of Sussex on its board of directors. It accused the charity African Parks of failing to curb poaching, ending a 15-year mandate to manage 2 of its protected sites in the Central African country. The Environment Ministry said African Parks had displayed an arrogant and disrespectful attitude towards the government, failing to cooperate fully with authorities. In the meantime, the charity said it had begun talks with the ministry to understand the government's position and explore the best way forward to support the continued protection of these landscapes that are critical to conservation. From Washington, D.C. to Europe, from Africa to the streets of cities worldwide, the headlines may differ, but the questions remain the same. Who holds power? Who demands change? And who pays the price? This has been Worldview. I am Imogen James. Until next time, stay informed and thank you for watching.